takes many years to build a good reputation and 1 second to destroy it. This is a lesson that these 7 NBA players had to learn the hard way, starting with Josh Giddey. As rumors started to fly that Giddey's inappropriate relations with a girl that was 15 years old at the time the pictures and videos were taken, Josh Giddey's career and public reputation took an absolute freefall. With a picture that says just F Josh Giddey and numerous other intimate photos, the questions began arising as it became hard to deny that there was at least some sort of relationship here. And as sources coming directly from the girl's high school validated the concern for her age, the investigation was on. But not only from weirdos on the internet, as this usually goes. The blow became large enough that both the NBA and the law had to intervene. Josh Giddey was instantly the most hated man in the basketball world, getting roaring boos from tip-off to buzzer in every arena he went in, and at times even his own. Despite the flurry of evidence that for damn sure didn't help his cause in disproving the allegations, the lack of details on the story muddied the waters on the exact timeline of events. Given that the two reportedly met at an 18-plus bar, it was not possible to confirm or deny that Giddey knew the girl's age, and the lack of willingness to comply with the law essentially meant in the eyes of the NBA and the law, Giddey was innocent due to the inability to prove him as guilty. But that same lack of evidence that may have saved him in the NBA's investigation, or at least from prolonging the investigations and possible legal trials, may have cost him the trial in the court of public opinion. It's no secret that Giddey is one of the most hated players in the league that will likely be mocked until he disappears from basketball for good, and judging by his play, that may be sooner than we initially expected. Despite a major jump from his rookie year to his sophomore season, following the allegations being public, Giddey's production, to put it simply, is not what it used to be. It looks like a promising, young, well-rounded point forward turned into what was statistically the least productive player in the NBA at a point last season. Last in true shooting percentage in the NBA, worst defender on the team in invisible plus-minus, and an absolutely terrible series against the Mavericks in the playoffs that led to the demise of the one-seeded Thunder season. The future of Giddey's career is not looking as bright as it was, and the same can be said about Meyers Leonard. As a big guy who can shoot the ball, Meyers Leonard may have had the biggest cakewalk in NBA relevance possible. After 7 mediocre seasons with the Portland Trail Blazers, Leonard had finally seen the fruits of his labor paying off with a $20 million payday and a starting role on the Eastern Conference champion Miami Heat. Meyers was on his way up. He wasn't lighting the world on fire or anything. I would never say that, but as a multi-millionaire being able to blow it in one of the biggest party towns in the country, his job security was also looking pretty damn good. As the rise of a three-point shooting center became more and more valuable, not only did his production rise, but it also hit his major shortcoming, which was his notoriously low basketball IQ. Leonard was known to pull some of the most boneheaded plays you'll see on the court, but as a three-point shooter with a decent frame, he was good enough to soak up minutes in the NBA, which means it's also enough to become generationally wealthy. But the stupidity apparently didn't end on the floor. After a shoulder injury in 2021, this left Meyers with a surplus of time on his hands where he chose to utilize his hobby to fill it while making some extra change on the side. Leonard got into the world of live streaming with his small yet notable viewer base of diehard Miami Heat fans most likely, who would be subject to a bombshell of a stream. And it wasn't just a Warzone win. Leonard would use an anti-Semitic slur to express his anger at the game. Despite his excuse of not knowing what the word meant, that meant little to the organization who clearly saw no future in the role player, disposing of him as quickly as they possibly could. Quickly going from a starting role on the Eastern Conference champions to injured and battling the struggles of the rehabilitation process, to making a single mistake that resulted in a full-fledged cancellation as the world seemed to voice their opinion on Meyers. The Cancel Meyers hashtag would trend for days after this incident, and as quickly as they could, Leonard would be swept under the rug as just another body in the NBA closet to seemingly never resurface. After 2 years removed from the incident, Meyers Leonard would eventually land another opportunity to play NBA basketball with the Milwaukee Bucks. After 2 years of giving to Jewish communities and speaking at numerous events on the importance of your everyday actions. But even after doing all that he could to try and make his wrongs right, and actually a pretty good performance with the Bucks with per 36 averages of 13 and 1, 12 points and 11 boards on nearly 50-40-90 shooting splits, Meyers Leonard would play what could very well be his final 9 games in the NBA, going unsigned for the 23-24 season. It's a bit hard to not feel bad for Leonard no matter how dumb his mistake was. While you're rising the ranks in the league, just one single word that he didn't know the meaning of apparently cost him his career: Bill Laimbeer. But it's a little harder to feel bad for Bill Laimbeer after his collapse from the NBA's brightest lights. Laimbeer's career really was something to marvel at. As oddly one of the first stretch bigs in the league, which rarely gets talked about, a defensive anchor and a vocal leader on one of the best teams of all time, Laimbeer's legacy should be held in high regard. But in the words of former teammate Dennis Rodman, He was more than a thug, but that's what he'll be remembered for. The instigator of the dirtiest team in the most physical period of basketball never really outlived the dirty player reputation. As Isaiah Thomas gained recognition as one of the best point guards in history, Dennis Rodman built his own goofy but respectable legacy. And Joe Dumars really isn't held in the same vein as Laimbeer either. He's kind of in a league of his own as one of the era's most hated players, and he really deserved it. When it comes to over-the-top put-you-on-your-ass fouls, Laimbeer wasn't hiding what he was out there to do. Whether you were a Pistons fan and couldn't see enough of the guy, or you were anyone else and you couldn't wait for the demise of the Detroit Pistons, it is impossible to say these guys weren't effective. 3 straight trips to the finals from 88 to 90 with 2 banners to show for it. These guys did what they had to do to get to the top. But in reality, being the bullies of the league couldn't last forever. The end of the Bad Boys era was a conclusion that many could not wait to finally see, with no more fitting ending than the strange disappearance of their poster boy center. The Pistons wore their hearts on their sleeves no matter where they went, and even in practice these guys were still beating the living hell out of each other for the love of the game. And after a decade of putting up with Bill Laimbeer's antics day after day, they finally snapped. Shortly after breaking one of his ribs, Isaiah Thomas caught one of Laimbeer's elbows right in his soft spot, stopping practice to freak out on his co-star. Laimbeer didn't break character for anyone, saying, "It's just a basketball play." After screaming out, "I don't need to take that shit," Isaiah Thomas would break his hand on Laimbeer's skull. Just 11 days after outscoring a prime Shaquille O'Neal, Laimbeer would retire from the game altogether, stating he no longer had the desire to compete after his antics drove his own team leader to hate his guts. In a move that shocked the world, this seemed like a very fitting ending to the team that will never happen again, if the NBA has anything to say about it, Josh Howard. Which they do pretty damn good of, because we sure as hell haven't seen another player like Josh Howard since his bombshell of an NBA exit. From beginning to end, Josh Howard's career was riddled in controversy. And I mean from the very beginning, before he even suited up for an NBA game, going into the draft as a projected lottery pick, he would see his draft stock fall off the face of the earth after deciding to be upfront with teams about his love for smoking a little green, at a time where this wasn't exactly accepted, especially for the world's top athletes. But as a young athletic wing who could defend, shoot, and score in bunches, Mark Cuban had no problem putting up with some skunky locker rooms if it meant finding a diamond in the rough. And a few years into his career, this surely looked like the case. 3 years after being selected 29th overall, Josh Howard was an all-star, putting up 19 and 7 on the 67-15 Mavericks, who sat on top of the NBA. The NBA was really in the palm of his hands at 26 years old as he continued to climb to 20 and 7 as Dirk's right-hand man in the 2008 season. This really looked like one of the NBA's brightest duos set to compete with the best for the near future. But in the span of a week, it seemed like Josh Howard was set on destroying himself. On top of his piss-poor play in the 2008 playoffs, 12 points a game on 29% shooting and 10% from deep, it seemed like Howard was set on standing in the headlines as much as possible. Howard started his media boom similar to his start in the NBA, going on a radio station to voice the status of not only his own smoking habits, but the tendencies of the league and his team as a whole. Is all of this true that I am reading, as far as players in the league have that problem? Yes. Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's nothing that's hidden. I think a lot. Everybody in the media world and the sports world know that NBA players, do smoke marijuana. So also in this article, you were talking about you don't feel you have a problem, that you do smoke. You don't smoke any during the season, but you do smoke in the off season. How true is that? Yeah, true, but like I was saying to the guy, that has nothing to do with what I do as far as basketball. When I go out there and perform. That's how I feel about it. Although no one really seems to give a S*** now, this wasn't the case in 2008. It painted a bad light on Howard and his teammates as they entered a tough playoff matchup after their collapse the year prior. Mark Cuban, in a pretty mature fashion, was clearly not happy about the situation, but unwilling to publicly out his player, stating he'd settle the issue internally. But as Josh Howard made an even bigger slip-up, it became harder to defend him. After a big Game 4 loss, Howard passed out flyers to his birthday party taking place in between Game 4 and the elimination Game 5, while down 3-1. To the disdain of his teammates and coaches, Howard actually followed through with the party, then went out and posted by far the worst plus-minus on the entire team. Maybe he wanted the off-season of partying and lighting up to come a little quicker. Once the off-season came, he made yet another splash, getting arrested for speed racing, going 40 miles per hour over the speed limit in his Lexus. While facing his third major media stain in just a few months, he didn't even give the Mavericks time to think it over before the absolute bombshell of a video that completely tarnished his reputation. "I don't even celebrate 4th of July. I'm black. I don't celebrate that shit." Whether joking or not, Howard was getting absolutely destroyed by the media for his comments, which were labeled unpatriotic. Well, it can be a big deal, because you're seeing a trail. And this is not the type of trail you want to leave as a professional athlete, where they become like trails of baggage you have to carry with you along the way. And in the climate that America's in right now, to come off as being unpatriotic is not good. On the back of all the things going on with Josh Howard for the last 5 months. Kevin. Yeah, I would have to agree with that. And the really sad thing about it is that Josh Howard at one time had Dallas in the palm of his hand. For better or worse, Dallas had to rid themselves of the media magnet, moving Howard to the Wizards, who quickly moved him to the Jazz, who moved him to the Wolves. After a couple of injuries, boom, bang, boom, Howard was out of the NBA, never to be heard of again. Since his exit, Howard has been on the right track, coaching the youth and advocating for staying clean from the distractions that taught him a very blunt lesson. As he's apparently grown as a person, and society has shifted in a way that actually puts him in a better light than it did before, Howard seems mostly forgiven, and by many, even pitied. Miles Bridges. The same could not be said for Miles Bridges, who made a mistake that was far less forgivable. Miles Bridges really had it all, with awards, more money than he could spend, and his lob partner creating the duo that looked like they were here to save Charlotte. There was way too much at stake for him to throw it all away. But in the daytime, it seemed that the world was ready to throw away Miles Bridges for good. Ever since coming into the NBA, Bridges had been a pleasant surprise in a city that doesn't get to shine very often. Putting up a very modest 7.5 and 4 as a rookie, Bridges had room to grow in every facet of the game. As a versatile and athletic defender who could shoot the ball and create for himself a little bit, really the sky was the limit. And year after year, it felt like he was on track to reaching it. The next year was a jump to 13-6. And as LaMelo Ball would land on the team the following season and took away some of the looks he was getting, he adapted his game to fit the needs of the team. Rising from a 33% to a 40% three-point shooter on 4.5 attempts a game, while stepping into that role as a primary defender every time he was on the floor. There were a ton of reasons to be high on this kid. As shown in OG Anunoby's $42 million deal, the NBA has extreme value in these ultra-versatile role players. As a glue guy, you can play in transition, spot up and shoot the three ball, play in screen and rolls as a roll man, and as his playmaking and ball handling developed, could even force other bigs to guard him as a pick and roll ball handler. Pick your team's weak points, let Bridges fill it, and it was no longer your weak points. Bridges would see a very dramatic jump in the 2022 season. Even though he was just third in field goal attempts on the team, Bridges would lead his Hornets in scoring at over 20 a game, and also led his squad to an above .500 record for the first time since Kemba Walker carried them in 2016. Bridges and Ball were the new faces of the city, with their ultra-fun and marketable on-court play styles meshing together perfectly. And their off-the-court friendship and seemingly likable personalities made them one of the most likable young duos in the league. Bridges would even be the recipient of the Hornets' inaugural Rick Bonnell Award, given to the Hornets player that best represents himself and the franchise with professionalism and cooperation in his interactions with the media. This would quickly turn into a laughingstock. Shortly after, Bridges would become the NBA's biggest villain. While being a restricted free agent and coming off a season in All-Star and Most Improved Player discussions, Bridges made the loudest media splash of his life going into the 2023 season, but this didn't have anything to do with basketball. On June 29, 2022, Miles Bridges was arrested for allegedly injuring a woman during a dispute that went way too far. Bridges turned himself in and was charged with a domestic violence felony. Soon after, the mother of his 2 children, Michelle Johnson, would post pictures of her condition after the alleged assault, and this turned the questions and shock of the allegations into an all-out hate mob. More details released in the allegations, in which Bridges pled no contest and received 3 years probation, painted an even darker picture. According to Johnson's hospital report, the assault consisted of strangulation, a brain concussion, close fracture of a nasal bone, contusion of a rib, multiple bruises, and a neck muscle sprain, all taking place in front of their 2 children. While Bridges was still technically unsigned, the NBA had the freedom to do as they pleased with his future. They concluded with a 30-game suspension, which most people agreed was a bit light, though in a weird twist of league rules, it effectively became a 10-game suspension. Bridges would sit out the 2022 to 2023 season, as a $7.5 million offer from the Hornets was not enough for his liking, and the Hornets were letting the legal drama wear off before silently inserting him back onto the roster. While the NBA reduced his penalty to just 10 games for the 2023 to 2024 season, Bridges was back on the NBA floor, and playing at an all-time great level. Although playing on a limited $7.9 million contract, an underpayment for a player of his talent level, Bridges put up 21-7. That landed him a 3-year, $75 million deal to stay in Charlotte, Bridges is a bit different from the other players we've seen so far. Into his PR reboot, it doesn't seem like his career is destroyed at all. In fact, Bridges seems to have rolled over a horrifyingly terrible crime like a speed bump back to new heights in his career. Although the NBA is attempting to be as silent as possible with the reinstatement of Bridges, the fans certainly have not forgotten the crimes committed, especially following Bridges breaking his girlfriend's windshield with pool balls while his children were in the car, all while on probation. Although Bridges is a really good basketball player, the fans seem to be the only ones holding him accountable for not being a good person, trashing him for what he did across all of his social medias and clowning on his celebratory return to the NBA with responses stating he should be returning to prison instead. I guess in the world we live in, crime does not always mean an equivalent punishment. Josh Primo seemed to learn as well. As a raw yet talented player, he could really be boom or bust. In the case of Dante Exum or Michael Carter-Williams, their failures as players primarily came down to lack of development from their base skill set. But in the case of guys like DeJounte Murray, when these guys blossom, they can become dual threats that any contender would throw huge dollars at. Landing on the Spurs, who had just traded Murray, Josh Primo was a very talented lottery pick who landed in a system that knew what they were doing with these kinds of talents. Most experts predicted Primo to go in the late first round, but the Spurs surprised the whole world drafting him 12th overall in the 2021 NBA draft. But if there's any roster that can be excused for taking a gamble, it's the Spurs, because these guys don't miss too often. At 18 years old, the youngest player in the NBA, Primo was set to make a splash. Although his success was not instant, Primo showed flashes of his all-around game throughout the 2021 to 2022 season. The Spurs, in a heavy rebuild, had no problem giving him more minutes to make mistakes and learn. As the season went on, there were reasons to be excited. The Spurs doubled and tripled down on their future with him, moving Primo into the starting lineup at the end of the season and taking their team option to extend his contract 3 more years. Primo looked like a cornerstone of the Spurs rebuild, which made it so much more shocking when 2 weeks later, after Primo's extension, he was cut from the Spurs just 4 games into the 2022 to 2023 season, at just 19 years old. This was shocking to say, at least as this was completely uncharted waters. Even Woj, Adrian Wojnarowski, weighed into the significance of the situation, stating, Josh Primo was the youngest player in the 2021 NBA draft when selected 12th by the Spurs. His on-court development absolutely had the organization excited about his NBA future. Waiving Primo so abruptly without explanation is fairly unprecedented and jarring. Primo released a statement following the mysterious release. He said he was receiving help for previous trauma. Fans demanded to know why a teenage guard, just picked in the lottery, was suddenly unemployed. The world soon got its answer. Josh Primo was let go after allegations arose of him inappropriately exposing himself to numerous women, most notably the team psychologist. She sued the team for not acting sooner, and Primo for exposing himself 9 times throughout the season. The NBA investigation found some truth. While Primo claimed his conduct was not intentional, the league determined he engaged in inappropriate and offensive behavior by exposing himself to women. How he could have accidentally done this multiple times, no one could figure out. The Spurs settled with the psychologist. Primo wasn't tried in criminal court, but his NBA career took a huge hit. After nearly a year out, the Clippers signed him on a 2-way deal. He played just 2 games before being waived again. His reputation outweighed his potential. Latrell Sprewell's reputation as a menace is pretty well known, but unlike Primo, his NBA career was long and at times successful. A 4-time All-Star, Sprewell made an immediate impact on the Golden State Warriors, finishing 11th in MVP voting in just his 2nd season. But his career came to a crashing end, and not for the reason most think. In 1997, after being criticized in practice for not making crisp enough passes, Sprewell mouthed off to coach PJ Carlesimo, demanding the coach keep his distance. Carlesimo approached anyway. Sprewell threatened to kill him, then grabbed him by the throat and dragged him backwards for 10 seconds before teammates separated them. After showering and blowing off steam, Sprewell returned and punched his coach. That earned him the longest suspension in NBA history up to that point. This wasn't the first time either. Sprewell once fought Byron Houston, a teammate 50 pounds heavier with a Mike Tyson-like demeanor. 2 years later, after fighting Jerome Kersey, Sprewell came back to practice with a 2x4 and threatened to return with a gun. Sprewell was hot-headed and burned bridges. Still, he played productive years. But his end was just as ridiculous. When Minnesota offered him a 3-year, $21 million deal at age 34, he turned it down, saying, "I've got a family to feed." No better offers came. Sprewell never played again. From choking his coach, to turning down millions to lawsuits, foreclosures, and IRS debt, Sprewell went from all-star to cautionary tale. The value of your reputation at the highest level of professional sports is truly priceless. What's more interesting is how perspective on an individual's actions is weighed depending on the era they played in. Check out this video here where we dive into some of the darkest days the NBA has ever seen. And as always, thank you for watching.